Hello and welcome. Thanks for coming here today. We're going to be talking about our cybersecurity framework and Cyban, but I think we're just going to give it a few more minutes for people to arrive. Yeah, I think for those of you that are London-based, it's certainly a good day to be inside watching a webinar today rather than outside dealing with that weather. Just admitting a few more people that are coming. All right, so thanks everyone. I think we can probably start now, and we'll start with some introductions. I'm Mark Kirby. I'm an Executive Director and IT Strategy Specialist at Intersys. Intersys are a managed service provider, or an MSP, with a focus on security. And we provide IT support to over 100 companies. We're a Microsoft Gold partner, and we run cybersecurity operations centers. We provide business as usual support for our clients and manage some specialist supply chain risk software. We're very used to working in highly regulated industries and have some large insurance customers, as well as some of the largest pharmaceutical companies. And I'm joined here today by John Clark. John, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Mark. I'm John Clark. I started working in cybersecurity 15 years ago. And in that time, I've spanned the entire range of cybersecurity, from red teaming as an ethical hacker, cracking the security of companies' products for them, to running an ISO 27001 information security management system. I'm currently a CTO and a co-founder of Cyban. I'll tell you more about Cyban in a moment. Back to you, Mark.
Thanks, John. Thanks. So today we're going to talk about how to use a framework for improving your cybersecurity. And this is going to be the first in a series of webinars focusing on each different part of it. And so today we're going to focus on the identify part. And Cyban fits very neatly inside that, that section of the framework. So John will then show us a demo of Cyban and explain a little bit about what it does. And then at the end, we're going to have some time for a Q&A. So a bit of housekeeping. You should see the Q&A button at the top of the Teams bar on the right-hand side if you're using the Teams client. If you're using the web client, you may not see it. So at the end, just raise your hand, and we'll be able to take your questions then. Great. So the cybersecurity framework that we've got here, you can see in the image, is based on something that was created by NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology. It's an American governmental organization, and this is very commonly used across the pond, but it hasn't actually been so widely adopted here. So we've started using it recently and have found it's got some really great results because it is a blueprint for improving network defenses. The nice thing about this is it's very flexible, and so it can be applied to all different sectors and any kind of different technology, where there would be a piece of software or an infrastructure. The key thing is it's an ongoing process. You know, security needs to be constantly managed because the threats that we're facing are constantly evolving. And what we're dealing with even 12 months ago is different from what we're dealing with now. So it's really important to evolve your defenses with emerging threats. So all of this is included in Intersys' cybersecurity package, where we give you the tools, including Cyban, but other things as well, and the expertise to help implement this in your organization. So we're going to dive a little bit more into what these pillars mean and kind of how this framework evolved. So as you can see here, there's a little bit more detail about each one of the pillars, and I really think it's interesting to think about how we view cybersecurity and how it's changed in relation to this. It used to be we only ever focused on the protect column. You know, a particularly small business would put in a firewall, an antivirus, maybe put in some data controls, and then say, that's it, I'm done. You know, my security has been sorted. But the way we've thought about cybersecurity, because of the increase in cybercrime, has changed. And one of our favorite quotes here is from the executive chairman of Cisco. And he said, there are two kinds of companies: those that have been breached and those that don't know they've been breached. Which is where these next three pillars kind of come in. So the idea is that at some point in your organization's existence, you're likely to suffer a breach. And you need to be able to have the tools and the expertise ready to detect those breaches as they happen. And then, of course, to be able to respond effectively and recover from that. And so we're going to be doing a series of these webinars, each covering different different elements. But today we're going to be focusing on the identify pillar. And so, as you can see here, one of the first things is you need to understand what it is that you're protecting. So this covers the assets such as your endpoints, your servers, your cloud hosting environment. But it's also about discovering what your data assets are. And so this is where you have to look at the business environment and understand what is important to the business. And that's different for every business. For example, a classic one is KFC. They had their 11 secret herbs and spices. And if that information got out, it would be far more far more damaging to them financially if their chicken shop down the road was starting to making the same chicken as KFC. So they need to protect that secret at all costs. I remember hearing a story about not having the two people that knew it on the same plane or something along those lines. I don't know how true that is, but it's certainly a story. So it's about understanding what's important. And, it may not be a recipe or a secret in that regard. It could just be reputational damage that could be caused by information getting out. If you are a school, doctors, if you deal insurance people, if you deal with people's sensitive information and that gets leaked, it could be very reputationally damaging to the business to the point where potentially you might have to close down. And of course, we don't want that, which is why we take this identified cycle. And this is where we've got this risk management image in the middle. So we identify the risks, we assess them, we develop a plan, implement that plan, and then back to the start and identify the risks again. So it's about that ongoing cycle, because as I was saying before, the threats are constantly evolving. So we need to constantly be evolving our strategies. And so one of the key outputs that you can get from this identify phase, and it's usually the first thing to do if you're kind of just starting on your cybersecurity journey and just getting some awareness, is establishing a security baseline. And so we've got here a list of things that you can do to start understanding where you are, because what's scary is not knowing what you don't know, if that makes sense. You don't know where the gaps are, you don't understand where the risks are. And so by performing things like network scans, vulnerability assessments, and security gap analyses, which my team and I do almost constantly at the moment, you're able to put together a list of vulnerabilities and understand where the weaknesses are. As I mentioned before, you've got to do asset discovery, thinking about where your sensitive information is within your organization. It might not just be on laptops. If people have email on their own personal phones, you need to think about ways to be able to mitigate the risk of that phone, getting lost and information getting locked that way. You need to understand what software is being used and managing where your sensitive data is. So one thing, and it's a bit of a buzzword, but shadow IT. It's an interesting concept about the IT that is used within your organization that is not put in place by the IT department or gone through any of the compliance measures. So this is often something someone's done to solve a problem or make it easier to share information, such as they might have a Dropbox account, a personal Dropbox account, and put information in there and share it with people just to get work done. But all of that goes outside of the controls that you've put in place from your IT department and your compliance teams, and it is potentially unregulated. So it's really important to have tools to be able to understand when that's happening and stopping it when you can. So the output that we get from this baseline is kind of getting a threat matrix. And so this is a document that we like to create a living document with a full list of all vulnerabilities, what it means if they're exploited, what the reputational risk if they're exploited would be, and what the financial risk, and then the likelihood of that happening. And then that will give each vulnerability kind of a threat score. And so you can really focus get value by prioritizing what's most important. And I'll give an example. If, for example, the finding was multi-factor authentication isn't enabled on Office 365, what that means is that if somebody's passwords got leaked by a breach, like say LinkedIn or Adobe, and they'd reuse that password for their email account, a hacker will be able to get that information, log into the person's email, and potentially either send out information, send out spam, damaging the reputation of the company, or download the entire inbox and potentially get some sensitive information, which could have a financial impact. The mitigation step for that is, of course, enable multi-factor authentication, and then we would look at rate the financial impact and the reputational impact, both of which I would say would be high, and then the likelihood, which I say would be, medium to high, because there's a good chance that could happen, particularly if you're a big organization, and then look at the steps to mitigate them. In this case, it'd be very simple: enable multi-factor. But it's really important to have that laid out and be able to be presented to the senior leadership team, so they have the tools to be able to make those decisions, because some things might not be simple to remedy. It might have a, several £1,000 cost, and they need to know that that's the steps that need to be taken and prioritize, what they're going to get the most value out of. And so this is often where Cyban comes in. We've been working with Cyban for a number of years now, and we've found it incredibly useful. Whenever we do a security gap analysis for endpoints, it used to be very time consuming and not holistic. We used to grab 3 to 5 random PCs and do a deep interrogation of them. Nowadays with Cyban, we're able to deploy it across the organization and then very quickly get a holistic view of where sensitive data is on endpoints and what the vulnerabilities are and what are the things that need to be done to reduce the impact of losing a device or having one breached. So I'm going to hand over to John, who's going to tell you a little bit more about Cyban.
Brilliant. Thanks, Mark. So moving on to the next slide. Cyban Technology. We started life in 2017, and back then we were known as Insurtechnics Limited. We founded the company based on our experiences of running an ISO 27001 ISMS. And as Mark said, we discovered at the time that there was no tool out there to help us understand the status of the devices in the organization. What software was installed on the devices, what data was there, simple things like antivirus and firewalls. Could that all be on one page? Those are the things our auditors were asking us for, and we had to put an enormous amount of manual effort into finding it. So that set us on a path to building Cyban. We rebranded as Cyban early in 2021, and it's been nearly 2 years now. Core ethos is simplicity and effective security. So that's what we're all about, is really making security simple and effective so that you can go around that identify, protect, respond cycle quickly. Okay. Now, I'm not going to drain the slide. There's a whole lot of bullet points there about our security. Feel free in the Q&A to ask anything about it. What I do want to flag up is that we were fortunate enough to be part of 2 cyber accelerators during our early years, and they were very foundational for us. So firstly, the National Center for Cybersecurity is the civilian branding of GCHQ. It's exactly the same people. In fact, it is just branding. And I spent a while talking with the security architects there and their CTO. And also LORCA, the London Office of Rapid Cyber Advancement. So the technology I'm going to show you has been vetted by very serious people. How it works. Starts by installing a sensor across all of your devices. And it's interesting, the GCHQ CTO said that they have exactly the same model for the security of government computers. The sensor is a sensor. It looks, but it can't touch. It can't change anything on the devices. So that makes it incredibly safe. It's a quick and very simple install. and then the sensor works in the background completely unnoticed. That starts sending reports about the status of the device into Cyban's cloud. Now, those reports include things like antivirus and firewall, also lists of software and the versions that are installed. The software versions, we put that together, we enrich that with our Cyban AI by looking at the NIST database. Mark mentioned NIST. They maintain a database called the National Vulnerability Database. The entries in that database are called CVEs, Common Vulnerability Enumerations. And those vulnerability enumerations are simply flaws in software. As they're discovered, they get added to the database, and those are the flaws, the vulnerabilities that threat actors will use to conduct malicious tasks on your computer. So our cloud AI is matching your software version against the vulnerabilities and against threat intelligence feeds from the over 100 ransomware exploit kits. Those are commoditized exploit kits that the threat actors use to penetrate devices. That, when we find a match, vulnerable software or any other insight, that's reported on our dashboard. So moving on to the demo, I'm going to show you screenshots of 3 aspects of the system. We're going to start first with a high-level view of the system, and then I'm going to talk about ransomware, cybersecurity, and the data analysis. So first of all, the top-level view. Over here, we see cybersecurity score. This is very much like your credit score. Higher numbers are better, so over in the green is good. And as Mark said, we break this out into things executives care about. So business interruption risk and reputational damage. We flag up points over there. On the left, we see headline values, 30 million pounds worth of data discovered on this network. We'll talk a bit about how that calculation is done later. 33 devices covered and no devices vulnerable to ransomware. When you install Cyban for the first time, you should be prepared that you will very likely find some devices vulnerable. That is extremely common. It's not to panic over, it's to take action and remediate. It's very usual to see vulnerabilities. Okay, so let's look at ransomware in detail. This is the ransomware page where we put together the ransomware attack chain and the devices and the vulnerabilities they're exposed to. So we can see there are 3 devices here with vulnerabilities flagged up, but none of them are serious enough to put the organization at risk of a ransomware attack. How does a ransomware attack work? So let's look at this panel over on the right. A ransomware attack proceeds by first getting onto a single device, and then from that single device, the threat actor will spread to all the devices in the organization, install the ransomware on all the devices, and then that will detonate, encrypt the data on the devices, and then you'll see the ransom note. So getting onto a single device is step 1. There are, of the 100+ exploit kits we monitor, there are 3 main routes that account for the vast majority of entries. First is vulnerable software, where somebody could send you a file, a crafted file that will trick the software into doing something bad and allow the threat actor access. Secondly, RDP ports might be open, in which case the threat actor simply has to guess a password. And finally, Office macros may be enabled, so a crafted Office file could achieve the desired result. Once they're on the device, they need to then take over the whole network. And fundamental to doing that is getting admin credentials on that single device, getting root in Unix terms. To do that, again, vulnerable software with a particular vulnerability known as a privilege escalation is the most common way. The hackers will determine that by loading Metasploit onto the device, and that will just give them a step-by-step instruction of what to do. or else a user might be running with admin credentials day to day, in which case the threat actor just has to wait for them to log on and take over their session. Once they've done that, they are able to proceed with their exploit. We can drill down into a device. So this device is not putting their organization at risk yet, but it's close. So it has an old version of Adobe Air. Our cloud AI has spotted that and flagged it up. And that would allow a threat actor access to it. It's targeted by exploit kits, so it is important to update this ASAP. Okay. All right. Once the threat actor is on this device, the first thing they're going to do is disable the antivirus. And that brings us over to the system's cybersecurity page. I don't want to spend much time on this because this is very standard cybersecurity information, but Mark tells me that it is really nice to see this all on one page, that there are no products that put it together so simply and so clearly, making it effective. So if you were to see something go red here in the antivirus column, there'd be a big red cross. You'd need to find out why. Was that done deliberately? Who did it? How soon will it be going green again? That's the use of this page. Final thing I want to talk about, and I'll go into a bit of depth, is the analysis of data on the system. We found £30 million worth of data. How is that calculated? Well, we can see there are just over 201,000 sensitive records. The sensor installed on the devices is reading Office files, so Word, PowerPoint, Excel, text files, PDFs, things like that. And a little bit of AI inside the sensor is parsing those files and looking for particular bits of information, and it's tallying those up. And those final counts are reported to the cloud. And I'll show you that on the next slide. But that information is put together with analysis from IBM and the Ponemon Institute, who do annual surveys of thousands of organizations. And they know from that, they analyze the costs of a breach, not just the immediate cost, but also the long-term results. So they put together a total cost of that breach, and we use that information here. It's broken out by industry, sector, and geography, and the system incorporates those into your calculation. So if we look in detail at one of the devices, we can see this device has over 1.3 million pounds worth of data on it. And here are the headline tallies that the sensor has reported. So we can see there's some information of various types. It's found a few credit cards and so on. Diversity is a catch-all name for the most sensitive GDPR category. That's things like sexual orientation, political affiliation, religious affiliation, things that penalize organizations heavily. The ICO is very sensitive if those breach. Finally, we can see the bulk of the cost of value of this data is nearly 9,000 email records detected on this device. We can see that this device is highly mobile. It's been on 3 networks in the past 30 days. And the system thinks that that's okay because it knows that the device is full disk encrypted. So if this machine was lost, all that we'd be vulnerable for is the loss of a device. This wouldn't be reportable as a data breach because the data is still encrypted. Okay. Just want to wrap up with a quick story on this page showing the power of this data. One of the first companies we installed Cyban at when we were developing the system, the CEO called me. He spotted the value of data on one of the machines suddenly jumped, and we were looking at it. It was the marketing manager. 2 days later, she handed in her notice and was resigning. So the CEO was able to have a conversation about their entire marketing database and where that had gone and how it would be secured. Okay, that's all I wanted to say. Very happy to take questions, but over to you, Mark.
Thank you, John. That's really interesting. And as I say, we've found Cyban incredibly useful. So if you are interested in, know more about Cyban or helping establish your security baseline, please do feel free to reach out to us after this. We're happy to set up a meeting and have a chat about where you are in that journey. So we're going to go over to questions now. I can see there is one question in there at the moment. It's does the value at risk include or exclude any GDPR fine? I think that's a good question.
Yeah, so I'll take that one. The IBM and Ponemon Institute break down their data by geography, so they know where in the world they are. So it does in Europe, or for European data, GDPR is included. They do include fines, settlements, enforcement actions. They include the total cost of the data breach. Not just GDPR in the US and California, the CCPA Act applies, and they understand that as well. So it's a very comprehensive number, and it does include fines.
Fantastic, thank you. I've got another question. You recommend the identifier pillar of NIST. What are some of the other tools that you recommend for the other pillars, such as detect and protect? So we're actually going to be doing a series of these webinars, each covering a different aspect of it. So, you can check out those to see exactly what we use, but detect, and I think we like to use Cloud App Security for people with Office 365. It is a great tool for finding out when strange things are happening with your data in the cloud. But there's other things for on-site. I used to use Cyberhawk, which is quite good, and Protect. There is a number of things for Protect. Microsoft Defender for endpoint is fantastic. Also ties great into the Cloud App Security. But we also use a mail filter called Mesh. And yeah, for Protect, there is a lot of stuff, because as I say, this is the more traditional setting up the walls. But if you'd like to learn more, please do join our further webinars. And we're coming to the end. I'm glad we managed to keep it under 30 minutes. Any other questions? If you can't post, feel free to put up your hand. But otherwise, I will wish you all a good day, and I hope you get to stay out of the rain. All right. Thanks everyone.
Everybody.